Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of Foxy Tales by Natalina Reis, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me. Chapter 1, The Chase. He could almost feel the bite of their sharp teeth as the incessant barking followed him through the forest. Huli ran faster, his full tail flaring behind him and his furry ears homing in on the growling behind him. Damn tails, he spat out. They would give him away if he couldn't get himself under control and retract them. He tried to slow down his breathing, an almost impossible feat as he bounded around trees, nothing but a blur of light to anyone watching, except for the hounds. Those would never let go or be deterred by Huli's speed. A clearing appeared up ahead, and he let out a quiet cheer. He'd be able to run faster within it and maybe lose the canines. It wasn't the first time he had gotten himself into this kind of trouble. Huli, or Fox, the name most knew him as, was excellent at putting himself into a tricky situation, especially if it involved a good-looking human male. His energy was running low again, and he craved the boost a love tryst always gave him. Unlike on previous occasions, this time the handsome male in question had been fully aware of Huli's true identity and had taken precautions. Thus, the fact that he was now being chased across the shadow forest by a team of at least 3 hungry, magically enchanted hounds. A small cottage popped into view on the horizon as if a musician had clicked his fingers, or whatever it was they did, and produced it out of thin air. It was a humble abode surrounded by a vegetable garden and a mini orchard. He sniffed the air, but couldn't detect any danger as he drew closer. Behind him, the barking continued relentlessly. They'd be upon him soon, unless he figured out a way of retracting his tails. Once his tails were out of sight, they'd lose his scent. Huli rushed toward the wooden door, hoping it was unlocked and that whoever lived there had vacated the place. Once he was inside, he'd be temporarily protected from the hound's sense of smell long enough to calm down and get rid of his tails. At least that's what he hoped. Busting through the unlocked door, Huli uttered a quiet thank you, the momentum almost throwing him into the roaring fire in the hearth directly across from the entrance. "Who the hell are you?" a voice exploded behind him. Shit, the house was not empty after all. Awesome. Now I have to deal with this human too. "Close the fucking door," Huli begged, bracing his hands on his knees and trying hard to regain his composure. Even a fox like him got winded after such an intense chase. "Not unless you tell me who you are," the human male said. Huli turned halfway to look at him. Couldn't he see his red tails gloriously and unwisely unfurled behind him? Right, he couldn't. Huli had no control over the scent his tails exuded, but he could glamour them from humans. "I'm being chased," he sputtered, trying to catch his breath. "Please, can you close the door? I will tell you everything afterward." The male, a tall young specimen with a mop of dark curly hair carelessly gathered into a high ponytail, hesitated for a heartbeat before doing as he was asked. "Thank you," Huli whispered, a sigh of relief escaping his lips. Now he could slow his heart rate down and cut the trail of the scent. Brushing off the dust from his clothing, he took deep breaths and checked for damage caused by the chase. His arms and hands were scratched and bleeding, leaving a trail of red stains on his light blue tunic. Shit, now I will have to trash my clothes. I liked this Shan Yi. His outrage only grew when he found a large rip on his left side where one of the hounds had sunk his teeth in. Damn dogs. Huli shook himself off, his tail swishing as he moved. Good, they're retracting. The sound of his pursuers was getting closer, but he wasn't as worried anymore. In a few more seconds, his scent would be back to human only, and the hounds would lose his track. He lifted his gaze to the other man and was surprised to meet a pair of intense lavender eyes studying him. "Who are you?" the man asked, crossing his arms over his chest. He cocked his head to the side. "Why are you being chased by the hounds?" There was sharp intelligence in those beautifully shaped eyes. They were finely cut jewels that glinted in the dim light of the fire. "Not jewels, petals of a lotus flower. Exquisite." "It's a long story," Huli muttered, one last swoosh telling him that his tails were finally fully hidden. "I don't want to bore you with it." The stranger anchored his feet solidly on the ground and twisted his full lips into half a smile. I have all day and nothing interesting to do. Damn, he's no chump. Huli hesitated. For once, he was lost for excuses. What could he possibly say? There weren't that many reasons why someone would be chased by the hounds. I may have stepped on someone's toes, he offered weakly, still unable to look away from the stranger's eyes. Someone rather important. That much was true. The prince he had tried to seduce was a favorite of the emperor, his first mistake in the row of many. How? When Huli cocked his head in confusion, the stranger added, How did you step on their toes? Huli looked down and grinned, wiggling his toes inside his black leather boots. I have big feet, really big feet, he quipped before looking up at the other man. You know what they say about the size of a man's feet, don't you? The stranger was not amused. He stood still with his powerful arms crossed over his chest. Stop making jokes and tell me the truth, or I will throw you out to the hounds. Huli didn't doubt he would do it. I tried to seduce one of the minor princes, he confessed, his retracted tails twitching in response. He didn't like it a bit. How did he know you're a nine-tailed fox? He might as well thrown a table at Huli's head. How did the man know that? I saw your tails and ears when you came in. That both explained it and totally muddled things even more. How can you... No one could see his tails unless he chose to let them. I have my ways. The cryptic answer didn't explain anything. How did the princeling find out? Still bewildered, Huli licked his lips and tilted his head the way foxes did. Someone I used to trust ratted me out. It still stung. He had fully trusted this friend. No, obviously not a friend. Betrayal tasted bitter, but the fact that Huli had been stupid and innocent enough to trust Zhu Ming tasted even worse. Innocent was never a term anyone had ever used to describe Huli, not even himself. He knew better than to trust anyone. The world was full of rats, and he refused to be their prey. Excuse me. The barking was so close now, it vibrated through the wooden house. A moment of panic seized Huli. Was the tall stranger going to throw him to the wolves? Well, the hounds? He stole a desperate glance at the other man, trying to decipher his expression without much success. This was someone who didn't wear his feelings for others to see, but kept them hidden deeply inside instead. The perfect poker face. After a moment of silence, the man strode to the door and opened it wide. Shit, he's going to give me up. The hounds stopped a few feet shy of the house, and the guards who followed them stared curiously at the guy whose body completely filled the doorframe. Why are you here? He asked the guards, a subtle note of displeasure coloring his voice. One of the guards called the hounds closer to him before responding. We're looking for a demon, he said. Huli cringed at the term. Why did people insist on calling his kind demons? It sounded so evil. Have you seen it? Huli's heart stopped for a second. Was this man going to give him away? Instinctively, he got ready to run. It would be a mad chase, but at least he'd have the advantage of no longer having a fox scent now. Not a soul. Huli exhaled a loud breath of relief. The guard cocked his head, his gaze focusing on inside the cabin. Who's that, then? He asked, pointing at Huli, whose heart fell to his feet again. The man turned halfway toward him. That? He asked as if there were more than one person inside the house. That's my lover. He's been here since yesterday. If the hungry hounds weren't salivating over the pebbles outside the path, on the pebbles of the path outside, Huli would have hugged his savior. As it was, all he could do was smile at him, a silent thank you in the upturn of his lips. The guard snorted at the word lover as if it were filthy. Are you certain you didn't see a fox dash through here? You asked me about a demon, the stranger said, no change in his tone. Not a fox. Semantics, the guard exclaimed, disapproval plastered on his face. Well, did you? The man who had saved his hide nodded to the right. A fox went that way a few minutes ago, but no demon. Huli was both impressed and a bit in love with the man who had the balls to challenge the popular belief that foxes were demons in such an open way. Not to mention, he was also not afraid of provoking the disdain of the guards by declaring himself queer. The men who were picked for the special royal guard were trained to hate anyone who was different from the accepted norm. After all, hate could always be used as a weapon. Let's go. The guards gestured to the other 3 guards to follow him before mumbling a slur under his breath. Let's go catch the fox. They both stood watching as the guards and their hounds filed away from the cabin and into the thickest part of the woods, where the stranger had lied about seeing a fox. Huli stepped outside as soon as they vanished between the trees and stood beside his savior. Thank you for helping me, he said. But why did you do it? I don't like the guards and their hounds, he declared in the same tone of voice he had been using all along. There was a finality to his statement that didn't invite any more questions. Huli let it go. Are you hungry? Was he ever? The race through this shadow forest had him famished. He nodded, hoping the man wouldn't change his mind about feeding him. I have a rabbit on the hearth, he said. You're welcome to join me if you like. He didn't have to invite him twice. Fox followed him inside, mouth-watering at the aroma of the rabbit cooking over the fire. How could he have missed it when it first arrived? It smells heavenly, Huli said, rubbing his hands together. Thank you for the invite. Don't thank me yet, he said. You might still regret having accepted it. Now, what exactly did he mean by that? Xiao Ying was the stranger's name. The tall, impressive man sat across from Huli at a small wooden table made for 2. The cabin could barely be called a house, consisting of 1 small room, a bathroom, and a separate outdoor kitchen. It was comfortable, though, heated by the roaring fire in the hearth, a small bed hidden in a niche by the translucent curtains, and floor cushions scattered around. Huli had to wonder whether the space was as small as it felt or if it had something to do with the size of his table companion, a giant of a man who, even sitting down, towered over him. Thank you again for covering my butt out there, Huli said for the 3rd or 4th time. He was never at a loss for words, but in the presence of this handsome, taciturn giant, his tongue, or his brain, refused to work properly. When Xiao Ying nodded and grunted his assent, Huli sighed. You're not much of a conversationalist, are you? The man did look up at him then, a ghost of a smile on his well-defined lips. I don't get many visitors, he said, surprising Huli. Forgive me. Xiao Ying was very handsome, hot really. Even though he had a lovely face with fine bones and high cheeks, he was all male, which pleased Fox to no end. His long, ink-black hair was tied in a high ponytail that swayed back and forth every time he moved, making Huli's fingers itch to touch it. Stuffing a piece of meat in his mouth, Huli mumbled, and the food is delicious. I was very hungry after running for a couple of miles. Why did you seduce someone who was close to the emperor? The question came out of nowhere and threw Huli into a coughing fit. It seems like a rather stupid thing to do. The guy didn't believe in beating around the bush. Huli liked that. It was stupid, he admitted, but sometimes my need to replenish my energy takes over my brain. Xiao Ying blinked twice. So you think with your dick, then? Another coughing attack assailed Fox, laughter mixing with it. You can say that, I guess, he said once he was able to. I prefer to think about it as my reckless side. It sounds a lot sexier, don't you think? The other man swallowed a bite and said, reckless is just another word for stupid. Huli flattened his palm on his chest. That is very hurtful, Xiao Ying, he said, feigning outrage. I am a fox, and that is how foxes are. Smart, but reckless. The giant continued eating while he studied Fox for a moment, his face devoid of expression. A question had been nagging Huli for a while. How come you can see my tails? I had them glamored. He was the first human to ever see through his magic. It both intrigued and worried him. I have a gift, the giant said. Glamours don't quite work on me. Not fully, anyway. Interesting. I wonder why. So you let me stay and chose to protect me, even though you knew I was a demon. The words stumbled out of his mouth, coated in acid. There was nothing he hated more than being categorized as a demon, a Yao Moi. Foxes are not demons. I can't in good conscience help someone who thinks that, Xiao Ying said, his eyes on his food. Huli smiled. The man might claim he's immune to glamours, but Huli's charm seemed to work anyway. Don't flatter yourself. It had nothing to do with your nothing to do with you personally. Could this guy read minds too? And no, I can't read minds. I'm just really good at reading facial expressions. Huli wouldn't point out that Xiao Ying wasn't even looking at his face. How could he read it? Well, I'm still grateful. The prince I had my eye on had been warned by someone I considered a friend, and he had a demon guard. And he had the demon guard waiting for me when I showed up at his place. Why did he suddenly feel the need to explain things to this stranger? Huli had never felt compelled to reveal anything about his life or behavior to anyone before. It wasn't a good day for me. Maybe if you stopped seducing people and allowed them to get to know you first, this wouldn't happen. The suggestion was made so casually, Huli wasn't even sure he heard it correctly. The man lifted his gaze to him. Ever heard of a courtship?